Right now, at this very moment, in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombings, the United States finds itself at a critical juncture in the still unfolding story of how the Obama administration combats threats to American civilians and wages what it no longer calls the global war on terror. From the very beginning, after September 11th, American policy in this area has been constructed through a series of often ad hoc decisions made during the intense moments following acts of violence against the United States. Those decisions have then gone on to have tremendous ripple effects and unintended consequences. Today, as we find ourselves in one of those intense, freighted, and momentous post-attack moments, the question of how the Obama administration reacts is one we should all be paying attention to. And there is no journalist in America, in the world, who has reported on what the war on terror actually looks like under the Obama administration better than my next guest, Jeremy Scahill. His amazing, comprehensive chronicle of the Obama war on terror, the new book, Dirty Wars, publishes tomorrow. A film, which is incredible and a must-see. The same name will be in theaters in early June. Dirty Wars is probably the most comprehensive account to date of what America's global battlefield looks like. A battlefield that was constructed with each new mission and the deployment of special forces and each new drone strike and each new frontier. The product of hundreds of individual decisions made under duress in reaction to an uncertain world that now add up to a global battlefield without front lines or clearly marked boundaries. Jeremy Scahill joins me tonight. He's the national security correspondent for The Nation magazine, author of the book Dirty Wars, producer of the movie the same name. It's such an amazing thing to have you here. And I just want to say this book is an unbelievable accomplishment. The movie's an incredible accomplishment. And anyone watching this, people that know your work from The Nation, what I want to emphasize about this book is that whatever your politics, you should read this book. It is just an incredibly carefully reported. It is large. People who are come to this book expecting a polemic, I think, will be surprised to find a book that really, in many ways, lets a lot of the facts speak for themselves. I mean, what this book does is show a side of our unending wars that we haven't seen. And
I mean, one of the things that was really fascinating to me about this process is that I met a lot of guys from the special ops community and the CIA community because of my work on Blackwater. And I got numerous calls, emails, met people at events who would come up to me and say, I don't particularly like your politics, but you were right about Blackwater. And there are a lot of guys in that community didn't like Blackwater. So I developed these relationships with a number of sources from that world. And they changed the way that I viewed my own politics. And I feel like I came to have a much better understanding of what those guys do on a daily basis around the world. And so part of this book tells the story of JSOC operators. I don't mingle with the powerful, Chris. I mean, my sources are guys that are doing the operations, are mid-level guys to lower-level guys that are a part of this apparatus. And I think, there are books that are published that are based on these leaks from the White House. My book tells the story of the foot soldiers in these wars and also tells the story of the civilians who live on the other side of our missiles or the other side of the night raids. And so, I tried to tell a story that was multidimensional and had both the CIA JSOC perspective as well as the civilians who are caught in this in Yemen, Somalia, elsewhere.
JSOC is the Joint Special Operations Command. It is a huge conduit for pursuing the policy of the Obama global battlefield. And I want to go back to start in 2009 because Umar Farouk Abu Muttalib tries to blow up a plane going into Detroit on Christmas Day. The attack isn't successful. He ends up setting himself on fire, being subdued by passengers. But in a series of interviews with authorities in early 2010, he details his relationship with the American-born Yemeni cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, including a trip to Yemen and supposed plotting. Awlaki becomes the first American citizen put on the kill list. Tell us about Anwar al-Awlaki. He figures very large in this book.
Right. I mean, Anwar al-Awlaki's family gave me complete access to their family archives and their family history and their photos, and I was allowed to interview multiple members of the al-Awlaki family, which no journalist has done before. I talked to Anwar al-Awlaki's mother. I talked to his sister. I talked to all of Anwar al-Awlaki's siblings. And so, I was able to put together a comprehensive history of this family. And al-Awlaki, interestingly, was a guy who, after 9/11, was an imam at a big mosque in Virginia, the Dar al-Hijra Mosque, and was a go-to imam and was profiled by the Washington Post.
Cable news bookers.
Yeah, exactly. He would have probably been on your show if you were on at the time. NPR, PBS, across the board, and was a guy that was really seemed to be struggling with how Muslims should respond to 9/11, but said the U.S. has a right to hunt down those responsible for 9/11, condemned the attacks, said that al-Qaeda had perverted Islam, but you saw a radicalization that happened with Anwar al-Awlaki, particularly when the Bush administration invaded Iraq, and we saw what happened at Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. And sort of fast forward, al-Awlaki decides to sort of hightail it out of the United States. He starts preaching more and more radically against the U.S. war wars and talking about a global war on Islam. And so as you saw the rhetoric from the Bush people escalating, al-Awlaki's radicalization, increase. And al-Awlaki bounces around. He's in London and eventually goes back to Yemen, where he then is arrested on orders from Washington and put in a Yemeni prison in the mid-2000s for 18 months, 17 of them in solitary confinement. And I reviewed all of his prison writings, and you see a serious shift in his political outlook. He comes out of prison and starts a blog, and he is answering questions on anything from, is it acceptable for Muslims to eat cheese that are bought in, supermarkets, to questions about, is suicide bombing acceptable under Islam? And he develops this huge community. When he first started to really hit on the U.S. radar in a major way was when n.d.a.a. Hassan shot up many of his fellow soldiers at Fort Hood, Texas, in that horrid massacre. And we learned that al-Awlaki had been in email contact with n.d.a.a. Hassan. Those emails have been declassified and show that Hassan was basically like a stalker. He was asking al-Awlaki to find him a wife.
Al-Awlaki was sort of like...
Yeah, al-Awlaki wasn't responding to him, and n.d.a.a. Hassan tried to offer him, a $5,000 prize and, all these things. And al-Awlaki's kind of just ignoring him and saying, yeah, brother, if I find you a wife, I'll let you know. And then n.d.a.a. Hassan commits this heinous crime and kills all of these soldiers, and al-Awlaki responds by printing a blog that says n.d.a.a. Hassan is a hero, and essentially calls on other soldiers, if they're Muslim, to do the same thing that n.d.a.a. Hassan did. And that really, I think, was when most Americans heard about Anwar al-Awlaki.
And so al-Awlaki is added to the list. Not only is he killed in a drone strike, his son, an American citizen, a 16-year-old Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, is killed. And there had been a lot of debate about what exactly went down and was it a mistake and how was it a mistake? And you have some new reporting in the book about the reaction of the president when he finds out about the death of Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki.
Right, so just to clarify, Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki was born in Denver, Colorado in 1995. He was the eldest son of Anwar al-Awlaki, had not seen his father for 2 years. Last time he saw his father was in 2009. He was living with his grandparents, upstanding citizens in Yemen. He ran away from home, tried to find his father. His father gets killed. 2 weeks later, Abdul Rahman is sitting outside with his teenage cousins when a drone enters Yemeni airspace and kills him and his cousins. There has never been an official accounting of what happened from the Obama administration, only through leaks. And they say that the ultimate conclusion was that it was an outrageous mistake and that they were trying to kill this terrorist named Ibrahim al-Bana. Ibrahim al-Bana, to our knowledge, is still alive, and we don't know who the intended target was. But what I am reporting for the first time is that a former senior administration official who worked on the targeted killing program told me that when President Obama found out that Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki had been killed, that he was incredibly upset about this, and that John Brennan, who at the time was the senior counterterrorism advisor, believed that either JSOC or the CIA may have intentionally killed Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, perhaps on faulty intelligence that he was 21 years old, or because he was simply a relative of Anwar al-Awlaki's. And so Brennan ordered a review of the strike of Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. And I asked the former senior official, what happened to the review, and he said, I don't know. I asked the National Security Council spokesperson, and she told me, we won't talk about it.
I want to talk more about this, and I want to talk about where counterterrorism goes from here right after we take this break.